Thanks for coming, everybody. Before I start, I just want to tell you a little bit about my life, put me in perspective of where I've come from in my so-called journey. I was born and grew up in England in the Midlands. I'm half Indian, half English, but I grew up as my English side, so I was eating the typical English diet of so-called roast beef and Yorkshire pudding and lamb chops and everything. And then on the TV one day before Sunday lunch, I saw lambs being stunned with a captive bolt before they were going to have their necks cut. And I thought actually being killed, and it was in that moment I realized that I was eating animals, and I thought, I'm done with that, I don't want to. I realized the connection that beef was cows and that fish were real fish, and so I stopped doing that. I actually thought the eggs were going to hatch into real chickens, so I stopped eating them too. And I told my mother actually that if they died of old age, I'd eat them. That was my mindset at that time, because I actually enjoyed eating animal flesh, bizarrely enough. But it wasn't that long, maybe a year or two, where I thought, well, I don't want to eat them however they die. And then when I was about 17, I'd had doubts about so-called dairy for some time. Like, what happens to cows when they get old? Do they put them into a retirement home? I didn't even know that they don't really get old. They're killed between 4 and 6 years old now. But then, back when I was 17, they were killed between 5 and 7 years old, so the lifespans got even shorter. But someone brought a leaflet into school, and it said what happened to cows in the so-called dairy industry, and I had 2 milk chocolate bars in my pocket, and I took them straight out. It was easy for me to make that choice. I know for a lot of people, it's not easy, and it takes time, and they have different pressures. But around the time I was 17, I also started to question a lot of other things in our lives that are seen as totally normal. I used to think about the inequality in our society and in like how some have so little and some have so much. And then I thought even beyond that into people in Africa who a lot are struggling, but a lot aren't actually struggling. But anyway, I started to think about pollution and habitat destruction and how they're affecting the lives of wild animals. We call them wild animals, but the animals that we call wild are free animals. And as vegans, that's our kind of ambition, is for all animals to be free. But the sad thing is that most of the free animals in the world are declining in numbers. There's only a few species that are increasing in numbers, and rats are among them. I do like rats, but mostly it's humans increasing their domination of the Earth's surface. At the moment, I think it's something like 80% of the land on Earth, or even more than that, that's dominated by humans. Dominated not just for farming, but for mining, for infrastructure, for many things. And so we can have a world where we don't exploit animals at all. We're not using them for food, for recreation, for what people call experimentation, for transport. So we can have a world where we have zero exploitation of animals, yet the numbers of free living animals is going down and down, just through our other activities, which cause habitat destruction, habitat fragmentation. I don't know how many of you have heard of habitat fragmentation, but even doing a simple thing as putting a fence up in your garden can drastically alter the lives of just creatures like hedgehogs who roam up to a mile every night looking for food and looking for mates. So that can mean they don't find a mate and they don't find food. So there's separating communities. There's certain communities and animals that need to travel to get food, to get mates, and yeah, they need to travel for many reasons. So there's not just the destruction of their habitats, but there's also the fragmentation of their habitats. And climate change is, I think, maybe one of the biggest animal rights issues, because those that are suffering most with the effects of climate change are free living animals. I mean, everyone knows about the polar bears, but there's many species, and there's one species, I think it's a type of marmoset, that's definitely gone extinct due to climate change, and there's a number of others that are going extinct, on the verge of going extinction. And a lot of this is not necessary to do, and a lot of us feel that we do need to do a lot of things that are causing these things. Things like going in planes, driving cars, buying things Our normal living here is very different to even our normal living 50 years ago. 50 years ago, the average vegan was consuming way less than the average vegan now. And I don't blame this on individual vegans. We've just carried on with what everyone's doing around us, like we did when we were children. Or, we just carried on eating as everyone else was eating, and eating animals and using their eggs and using their milk. And we've done this through ignorance of the effects. So we've all increased our consumption, including vegans, have increased their consumption in terms of transportation, in terms of clothes, in terms of food, in terms of living space. At the moment, houses are getting bigger and there's less people actually in the houses. In India, I think the average space per person in a home is about 110 square feet. And I think in England it's something around 400 or 500. So we've got like 4 or 5 times as much space. Are we any happier for having that much more space to live in our homes? It may be that it's an IKEA look home where there's lots of space in between furniture, but it may just be a home that's crammed full of stuff. So the bigger the homes we have, the more stuff. And all the stuff that we have, it was either grown or it was either mined. And there's so many facts and figures about different species in the world and about different mining operations and pressures. And orangutans, one of the things that's destroying the habitat of orangutans is not just palm oil, but it's also mining for gold and other substances. So, mining, one of the biggest mining operations ever devised, is about to commence in the next 10 years. And not many people have heard about it. Greenpeace have just recently took it on as a campaign, but they haven't really said the cause of this mining project. And that's because I don't think they want to put people off, because the cause of this mining project is driving cars. It's for the so-called green movement. The biggest mining operation ever planned is going to happen in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. And it's for nodules, they're called nodules, and it's where cobalt extraction is from. And it's going to create a type of pollution it's going to create massive dust plumes. And Sylvia Earle, an oceanographer of many, many years, she's spoken out against deep sea mining, but it's necessary to continue our use of cars, to have electric cars and hybrid cars. We need these metals, these rare earth metals. So, but do we need to drive cars? Some people for sure need to drive cars because of disabilities, mental or physical, or because of their work situation, or some special family bonds or something. But there's always, for a lot of people, the viable option of public transport or a bicycle or indeed their feet. But in terms of car use, it's something that it's one of those areas that we've all increased in, as is planes. People now think nothing of going in a plane. My mother and father live on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean, and I managed to live for 37 years without going on an airplane. But in recent years, I've started using an airplane. I came back to have time with my mother. She's 84. And I realized that getting on that plane, I've created the same amount of greenhouse gas emissions as if I've not been eating a vegan diet for 2.5 months. So, a lot of us have circumstances that don't make it easy to make choices like this, but I think a lot of us can make choices that can result in less harm to free living animals. But we're not so inspired to make these choices because not many people are doing these things around us, and because we're not aware. I mean, like a lot of people, they're so oblivious to what's happened in the animal farming industry, in the farming of animals. They're so oblivious to the facts, and a lot of it's oblivious to pollution. I mean, I don't know how many people are wearing here, but basically the textile and fashion industry is the second most polluting of waterways on the earth. And you ought to go away from today's my talk today, to go away realizing that every single environmental issue is an animal rights issue. And we're used to people who talk about environmental issues as being people that want to save species. They want to save species because, what would the world be without rhinoceroses? They're nice to look at, they're interesting, or because, if we take something out of the food chain, it might affect drastically our life support system. So there's really a void in people wishing to protect the lives of free living animals from a perspective of individuals, that we care about them. We don't want to pollute their lives, we don't want to destroy their homes, we don't want to make it difficult for them to live. But the ways we're making it difficult for them to live, it's not obvious to us. When we buy clothes, how are our clothes dyed? How was the materials grown? I think it was the 5th largest sea in the world, the Aral Sea, virtually disappeared through the growing of cotton. Is anything really eco? Is a t-shirt really eco or green if we don't need it? Leicester Animal Rights, I think, has been a bit of a leader in this area. Leicester is actually the place where the word vegan came from. Dorothy and Donald Watson came up with the word in 1944, and they actually, I was pleased to realise a few years ago that they came up with the word in a dance hall, and it's the same dance hall where my parents met, which I was pretty chuffed about. But what on earth was I saying just then? Before that, I got. What was I saying? Someone tell me. What was I talking about? Oh, thank you, Rob. Thank you, right. Animal rights t-shirts. So back in the early 90s, we used to do a booth every single week, because I got involved with animal rights when I was about 20. I went for 5 years so I was 21, 22, and I went for 5 years without knowing any other vegans. No vegan friends, no vegan acquaintances in Leicester. And then I joined an animal rights group, and I suddenly knew about 8 vegans, and I'm still friends with some of them now. But yeah, in those years, in the early 90s, we had a booth every Saturday in the town centre, and we'd have loads of leaflets and fact sheets, and we had some t-shirts with slogans on and different messages, and all our t-shirts we sourced organic and unbleached, because basically there's no dyeing process that's being used, even in eco-green t-shirts, that, as far as I know, isn't harmful to animal life. So I've known for some years that the dyes just go straight in the rivers. That's one reason that there's not many dyeing industries in England now, and that they're abroad, is because so-called environmental protection regulations have got stricter. And there are regulations in Indonesia, in Bangladesh, in India, in China, but basically no one follows them. So what happens by the textile dyeing factories, the dye just goes in the river, sadly. And a few years ago, I actually happened to meet in Leicester a guy that used to manage a textile dye works in Bangladesh. And I said to him, is it true what happens to the dyes? And he was a bit cagey about telling me at first. And he said, yeah, it goes straight into the rivers and you see the fish floating to the top. So, yeah. The Aral Sea, I mentioned the Aral Sea. The reason the Aral Sea disappeared basically on satellite, you can't see it, is through cotton production, is through the irrigation, and took so much water that the salt increase in the lake basically destroyed life who lived in the water, and the lives that depended on those that lived in the water. But I'd like everybody to think about, well, are people happier in India and Africa, or are they less happy? I don't know either way, but I pretty much don't think they're less happy in the places where they consume way less than here. And so all this excess living, it hasn't brought us more happiness, but what it has brought is harm to free living animals of the world, and that's what I'm trying to share at the moment. And as it isn't, as vegans, we want the whole farming industry to change from the farming of animals to totally sustaining us with plant food. That's a really huge thing at the moment, but we all want it to happen. But there's just a huge thing to change other areas of our life as well. But I'd like to see that as important as well. And back for vegans 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, it wasn't so easy just eating a vegan diet and having the morals of being a vegan. But they did it because they were incentivized to do it, because they knew that if they weren't doing it, they knew the harm. Even though it wasn't apparent in society, it wasn't talked about. So, and I feel for me, as soon as I realized that what happened with cows and other animals and the harm I was causing them through what I ate, or who I ate, I felt glad to be rid of that. I'd been in doubt for years about the dairy industry. And when I realized, I was sad, and I was like, wow, I didn't know about that, but I was so glad to be not contributing to that anymore. So I think there's in my title for this talk, there's about liberation. Is it more our liberation? Because I think a lot of us are trapped in these consumption patterns. And the collateral damage of them, as I say, is the free living animals of Earth. But we are, in a way, the collateral damage, because through our consumption patterns, we seem to have less community and less friends, and it's more difficult to see our friends and family. There's space, and there's busyness, and this and that, and so yeah, I think as our consumptions increase, we've lost a lot of beautiful things. We've lost, like, families making clothes for each other or mending stuff. We don't value stuff so much. It's just, oh, I go and buy a new one. And do we see the harm of buying new stuff? Yeah, it's a social activity, actually, isn't it? It's like, yeah, buying stuff, it's an event. I mean, that's one reason why it's not straightforward to change. Going out shopping is a social activity now. It's not a social activity to get it together and I don't know, knitting or sewing or fixing some stuff, or well, it is for me anyway. And I really feel my life is pretty beautiful and exciting, and it's an adventure. I don't just go to a shop and buy something. I don't just go on a phone. Well, occasionally I go to a shop and buy something, maybe a bike patch, but even that doesn't happen much. A patch from any tube. But yeah, I don't basically buy anything. Living in this society, for me, is pretty easy because there's just so much access. I haven't bought new clothes since I was about 20 years old, since I realized the harm being done to free living animals. And I feel okay with my dress. It might not be fashionable or whatever, but so yeah, it's embracing. I really wish people to see it as the potential and definitely the possibility it does happen, embracing something more beautiful. But yes, it is a transition, but I think we can all make changes, and maybe little ones, maybe big ones, but for me, it's an adventure, my life is, and I'm happy to share this information. For me, when I'm doing animal rights stuff, I don't talk about this stuff with people on the street. I talk about, one of the questions I ask people is, I say, do you know how old the chickens are that you eat? First of all, I ask them, do you eat chickens? I don't say, do you eat chicken? What is chicken? People eat chickens. They've got an identity. They're individuals. They were deprived of their family, whatever. So, and most people, they guess like 6 months or 12 months. Nobody knows they're like 42 days, about 40 days old. So I say often they're like people who are about 20 years old, and I think, and they don't want to see the pictures, they don't want to see the videos, and they avoid it. And I just think, what would it be like to live a whole life trying to avoid connecting up your own choices with the results and consequences of your choices? And I think that's not very nice. I encourage them, you can live the rest of your life, eat a vegan diet. And so I have the same thing, I think, with so many of my choices. Yes, some of my choices I compromise my values, like going on a plane, coming here to see my mother, and everything. Lots of choices are a compromise. But lots of choices we can help ourselves and not help animals, because free animals don't need helping. We don't need to save them. They're already doing pretty fine. They've got more freedom. I mean, there's pressures and everything, but we don't even need to. It's our choice. It's our personal choice. Like people say, oh, don't use personal choice for your diet. That's a lie. How can it be a personal choice whether to do that to a chicken or a cow or a pig? So it's my personal choice. Oh, I like this color. Oh, no, I'm fed up with that. I mean, personal choice, but it's got consequences. So, how am I doing with time, Andrew? What do we got? 10 minutes. All right. Do you want to do questions? All right. So we do some questions. Anyone got any questions? Is there a spare mic for? All right. Well, I'll give you the mic then. If you could. Where am I going? The chap there put his hand up.
Hello. Alright, cool.
Hiya.
I just wanted to ask, like, in terms of fashion, what would you say your opinion is on buying second-hand clothing rather than buying first-hand? Do you think that offsets people's like carbon footprints, that kind of thing, or offsets their value to that? Or?
Thank you. I think that's a great question, and definitely buying second-hand is much preferable to buying new. But kind of second-hand charity shops, they kind of work hand in hand, I think, with the fashion industry, because you go in a charity shop there, the clothes are like new. So I think ideally, and I've hardly bought anything from a charity shop in 30 years. Definitely less than 10 pieces of item I bought. Because there's mending clothes and making clothes. I mean, mending clothes, mending stuff in general it's just common knowledge, or way more common knowledge, or there's people in the family who'll do it in most places in the world. But we've lost this. And so yeah, there's mending our clothes, and there's also sharing, connect it with community. And what I like, I mean, having a history to our clothes. Like, when I see a butcher's shop, I don't know about you, but I know the history. I look at that piece of flesh, or I look at that egg, or if I see someone having some milk, walking on the street with a bottle of milk, I think that's got a horrible story. But I also see that when I go past shops and I see all the clothing. And I don't just think about the free living animals, I think about the people working in the factories. I don't know how many knew about the Rana clothing factory collapse. I think it was in Bangladesh again, a clothing factory collapsed that was supplying Primark and different companies like that, and about 2,000 people died. So I think the benefits of eating a vegan diet are so beyond the animals in terms of so-called environment, in terms of pollution, in terms of our health, and in terms of preventing the next pandemic. But so yeah, I think I've answered your question. Buy them if you haven't got another source, for sure. Buy them from a charity shop, whatever. Any more questions? Oh yes. Let me just, I can remember your Dexter, yes. So Dexter gave me this badge last year, and I put it on for this day. It says, "Here to change the world." Now, when most people read, he asked the last question, but I hope we've got time for it not to be his last question, the last question today, but here to change the world. A lot of people read that and they think, oh, like he's some crusader, like he wants to change the world, but every single choice we make changes the world in some way. Trees, are they here to change the world? They're changing the world. They're creating more oxygen, absorbing carbon dioxide, and we're having less and less of them, and so every choice we make changes the world. Me using this microphone changes the world, not just you and hearing my voice, but the electricity used to do it. And so that, I'm wearing that badge, here to change the world, just like a butterfly flapping the wings can create a storm. Everything we do changes the world. Do you want to hand it to Dexter? Thank you.
You talk about the dye. Could you just get a bucket of water and put the dye in, and then wait for the water to dissolve, and then the dye would dissolve with it?
Thank you. You're doing a good job. Thank you. Yes, but generally when you do it, the clothes won't absorb all the dye. I've actually dyed some clothes myself with so-called natural dyes. I've used oak galls. They're the little things that, I don't know. Anyway, I've used the husks of walnuts and different things I've used, but they're non-toxic. They're just, But the eco dyes, if you use an eco dye, whatever, they're generally toxic, and it won't absorb all the dye. So you have something left over. So then what do you do with it? The dye, you know, there's nothing really. So you don't just end up with water once you've dyed the clothes. There's still some dye in the water. So yeah, I don't really think that's an idea. Maybe if we did it ourselves, if we dyed our clothes ourselves, actually, it'd probably be better, you know, because people would realise, hey, this is a toxic process, and I'm left with this. What am I going to do with it? You know, so I go down the local river. It's like, that's what, if people killed the animals themselves, people say they know that animals are being killed for them, but do they really know? Because I think a lot of people, if they went to a slaughterhouse, they'd never eat animals again. So, yeah. Any more questions? Here? Okay. Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so, wow, shit. I will maybe come here, so. Yeah, so maybe my question is that, like, I really liked your talk, but when we talk to non-vegans, if we say that, okay, you need to go vegan, and then you need to be eco-friendly, I think, is it that too big of a thing to ask for people, because being vegan is already considered extreme, and then if I think like, I guess we won't get all people to become eco-friendly and vegan, and I think it's better to get them at least vegan, and then when they are vegan, then we can push this message. But yeah, I don't know, what do you say to this question?
Thank you, that's a great question, and I've asked it before. And I don't talk about this stuff when I'm on the street unless someone is saying, well, what about your shoes? You pollute the earth as well. I say, well, I do care, you know, I know that, yeah. So I don't, it's like, yeah, I don't talk about these people on the street, but I'm talking to a bunch of people who are vegan, you know, or interested in being vegan, or close to being vegan. So this is a time when lots of long-term lacto-vegetarians are becoming vegan. Is it a time when vegans can get more vegan? And it's not, I forget, the questioner, he used a word about, and it was an environmental issue, but it's not a separate thing. This is about harm to animals. And yeah, and we can do something. We can't do it all at once, but we can make conversations about that, have awareness about this, and yeah, so did I cover that correctly enough? So one more question. All right, hold on a sec. Yeah, all right. Do you want to come get it?
Can I take it up there rather than put the mic in front of the speaker?
Thank you. It leads on from the last question, really, is that when I became aware of the impact of the fashion industry and textile industry on the environment, it struck me that, just thinking about one of my daughters, she buys an awful lot of disposable fashion. And it occurred to me that, are you aware of any organisation that goes into school to educate kids about their use of fashion and disposable fashion? Because I think if kids change, the parents' choices will change, and they're the next generation, and so it goes on. I chose my nephew's secondary school on the basis that they had an environmental policy, and that's one of their pillars, one of their ethos. I've actually been very disappointed with that school, and I approached them about it, and they weren't very receptive. Are you aware of any organisations that go into schools to talk specifically about these issues to kids, to change them, and so it goes on and perpetuates?
Thanks, that's another really great question. All the questions have been great. Unfortunately not, and I think it's the most important area is sharing information with children. And I'm not surprised it's not in schools, because that would end up with children maybe consuming less, and because they're consuming less, they might not need to earn as much money and might not contribute to the gross national product so much. But no, schooling is, even though it's seen as something we need to do and it's necessary, schooling, I'm very friendly with a bunch of home education families in Leicester whose kids aren't sent to school, and I totally understand parents sending their kids to school. I'm not against it, but it's a challenge, yeah, because it's schooling only came in the 18th, 19th century, and basically it came in a big part of the Industrial Revolution. and it basically makes normal people workers and childcare, and I understand a lot of parents need childcare, but it's also social. All the kids are at school, so what does your kid do if they don't go to school? It's not straightforward, but yeah, I think the message, I really wish the message that I'm sharing with you just goes out to kids more, because stuff gets set in as a child, you know. It's way easier for people to change as a child than it is for them as a, you know, when they're an adult. And yeah, so good question, and I wish there was more stuff. I'd like to go to be getting in schools and talking to kids. I get into schools sometimes and take the kids out on bikes. So that's something I like doing. Okay, I think is one more question squeeze in, or Andy? One more question? One more? No, that's it. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you so much, Jamshed, and I am so sorry for all the delays, having to change things, and I'm so sorry to you in the audience for putting up with us, but I thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, and thank you for coming to see this wonderful
Can I say one thing?
human being. Yes.
Okay.
I don't recommend any of you get on Facebook, but if you are on Facebook, there's a group that admin for called We Share the Earth, because at the moment we don't. We're basically dominating it, especially the ones that are doing well. Thank you.
Thank you. Big round of applause. Thanks.
See ya.